Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dan I, and welcome to the second part of our four-part mini-series, Laker Connections, the Media Summit pregame show. Last week we discussed the paying of college athletes and the life and career of Steve Levy. Tonight we will discuss the controversy over the Redskins name change in Washington. Some consider the name to be very offensive in a historical perspective, while others believe that changing the name will not bode well economically for the team. And later, Steve Levy is no longer the moderator for this show. Instead, he will be on the panel. We'll reveal the new moderator later, and we'll have a chance to talk to him later on in the show. This is Laker Connections, the Media Summit pregame show. I sat down with Native American Studies professor Dr. Kevin White earlier today. White has a master's degree from the State University of New York at Buffalo in American Studies with a concentration in Native American and Indigenous Studies. White is also 100% Native American of the Mohawk tribe, bringing a unique perspective to the issue. And let's take a look at what he had to say on the name change in Washington with the Redskins. Dr. White, thank you for having us in to talk to you about this issue, which is just most recently become very prevalent in the national eye. But you have history with this in the past, like you had said, with over the past 15 years. What has your experience been with this topic over the past decade and even longer?
Well, to begin with, I think it goes back to the use of Indian imagery and Indian peoples as mascots within the American sports culture, ranging from high school levels to collegiate level sports to professional teams. For me, the American sports culture is quite large, with only one state thus far in all 50 that will eliminate, has proposed to eliminate all sports mascot at the K-12 level, and that's Minnesota. New York State itself has sent a letter out encouraging communities to change the mascot images, but thus far it's only on a voluntary basis. When we get to something like the Redskin issue, that has a long-standing history, and of course it's really become prominent in the last 2 weeks with Bob Costas weighing in on it, Ray Halberter weighing in on it, and encouraging the fact to change the mascot. There is some debate whether it's a racial slur or not, but I actually agree with what Mr. Halberter says, which is explain to an Indian child how it's honoring.
So then also off of that, why has, in your opinion, being a Native American Studies scholar, what has made this all of a sudden so much different in the past month as compared to the discussion that's been going on for a very long time?
Media sources have begun to voluntarily not use the Redskins' name in reporting about the team. I think that more people are catching on to it and debating it is really interesting. It really does boil down to we do not have that many other ethnicities that are being so-called honored, as it dehumanizes the American Indian as a people and as a race and as a culturally distinct group.
And just like you were saying, taking this and using the name Blackhawk and using it as an honor, as a bravery, also using it just from the perspective of a warrior class, as this is what you would want to personify your team as. Is that, I guess my question is that a flaw in the thinking of a fan base, that this can be attributed to a people instead of a other object?
Well, I think that's what it is. I think, in the use of the Redskins, and in fact in the use of any of the sports mascots that are native related, you're objectifying people. You're objecting a culture, which makes pop culture references even harder to combat, because in essence, all of these images are constructed about the American Indian. They're not really getting to know the American Indian peoples, and I use the term plural, has distinct cultural groups that existed here prior to the formation of the country. I think the best way it was put was when one Native community member looks at the camera and says, "What part of ouch are you not understanding?" And the second part of this becomes something that went on that mascots, when Native Americans are speaking up about mascots, it becomes that we're interfering with American sports fun. And that in itself is a minimizing position to be put in. And, we hear behind the arguments that it's too costly to change the mascots, that it will wreck the economies of the sports franchises that use them. But I would beg to differ given the profit margins of many of the sports teams that we're talking about.
And in the national media, now that we've seen this discussion, do you think that the lack of a Native American presence within the media is hurting this campaign to change the name, because it is very Caucasian male-based?
That there aren't Native Americans in prominent positions. I mean, and in many cases, we don't see the celebration of Native American athletes even, except among the small Native communities. There are, I believe 3 different major professional baseball players right now that are all Native. And when we begin to think about this in that way, it's not that Native people aren't there or that they're not available, and it's not that we're the smallest percentage population of the United States, but it's also, it comes down to this fact of having that prominent voice and having the ears of political interest.
What is your personal view on this topic? It's obviously unfair to the Native American, just in general, it's completely unfair, that could be argued, but what is your personal thoughts on this?
My personal thoughts are, Redskins are very problematic because I'm in the camp that does look at it as a racial slur. Even in my own childhood, going back to when it came time to study about Native Americans, or even back then we called them American Indians, and then to have all this negative imagery and this negative connotation come out, it was shocking. It was about the scalp bounties that were paid, and I always come back to the same point, that the constructed image of the American Indian saturates American culture and American pop culture. It's not who we really are, it's who Americans think we really are. It's really fascinating when you think about how much the American Indian image, and constructed image at that, saturates American culture. We're really the only ethnicity that it's permissible to, and quite frankly, at times it becomes because we simply don't have the numbers. You can look at each racial and ethnic stereotype that has existed in pop culture and media, and they've largely fallen by the wayside. And a number of colleges, to their credit, including Syracuse University, St. John's, and others, voluntarily changed the name as soon as Native student activists in the 1960s began to raise the issue. Did it take that long for people to reject the Syracuse Saltine Moran and embrace the Syracuse Orange? No. And everybody's just as prideful as they have always been. So, I think it is time for some of these images to fall by the wayside, because they harken back to when it was okay to be racially discriminatory.
And just one last question. In your mind, what's next?
It's going to be interesting, because there's going to be, we've already seen back and forth on both sides. I'd like to see the rest of them fall by the wayside as well. But you're always going to find even Native people that willingly embrace these images. For every Indian you can find that's against the mascot, you're sure to find somebody that is not that culturally in tune with their own identity, that is willing to say, oh yes, I'm for it, I'm not offended by it. And so it becomes this ping pong effect. It's one of the last cultural and ethnic identities that it's okay to appropriate, to mock, to make fun of. Even recently with the Cleveland Indians wild card game, where they showed 3 Indians painted up as Chief Wahoo and they called it red face. Think back 25 years ago, it could have been blackface and it would have been okay. Now it would have been offensive. So Native Americans in general are waiting for that effect to take place in American culture today. All
right, Dr. Kevin White, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Once again, thank you to Dr. White for sitting down with us today. We're going to take a quick break, but when we coming up, we'll continue the discussion of the Redskins name change in Washington. And later I'll have your full Laker Connections sports update. Stay tuned. You're watching Laker Connections, the Media Summit pregame show.
The 2013 Louis B. O'Donnell Media Summit. Moderated by ESPN sports broadcaster and class of '87 Steve Levy. Coming to Waterman Theater November 6th. Stay connected by visiting mediasummit.org for updates.
Every night before the show, me and the guys, we like to loosen up a little bit. Blue, 42, hike! Every now and then, Dan likes to take it a little too far. But hey, the show's all about competition, so we'll take it.
Stupid Dan with stupid football and stupid running.
Hi, I'm CNN's Rob Marciano, and you're watching WTOP 10, your television station.
Attention students and faculty. Avery Rental Properties is now renting for the next school year. Avery accommodates all group sizes, small or large. Avery Rental Properties. Make our house your home. 24-hour maintenance, garbage removal, snow removal, and off-street parking. Avery Rental Properties. 315-343-5005.
I'm lucky. I get to do something I love. How many of you think homework is just as important as teamwork? I help keep kids in school. Good. And that's the name of the game. My name is LaDainian Thomason. I don't just wear the shirt. I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United.
Welcome back here to Laker Connections, the Media Summit pregame show. Once again, I'm Dan Nye, and we're going to dive right back into our discussion with the name change for the Washington Redskins. And I'm joined by Sonny Goldbaum in the middle there with Scott Wiktorowski and Matt Moran on his sides. And guys, thank you for joining me tonight. I want to just start with your initial reaction to Dr. White's comments. I know a little bit bustling in and out there, but you guys had a chance to listen to it for a minute. What are your thoughts one way or another? Matt, let's start with you.
Well, I'm definitely for the name change. I mean, you hear from like he's 100% Native American, and he definitely showed that, you know, this is a term that is a derogatory term to describe Native Americans. It needs to go.
Sonny, what about your thoughts?
Dan, I'm going to have to fully agree with Matt here. It's racist. Point blank, it is completely racist, and it doesn't only offend Native Americans, but it offends me, it offends others, and the name's got to be changed, Dan.
And Scott, you're kind of the odd man out here, sitting all the way at the end there. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you know, I looked into it. He did have a powerful message with what he was saying about everything, but unfortunately, the way America has come along to be, and the NFL included, it's about the business of the game. And right now, Washington, as a team, they're the third highest valued team in the NFL with the way they are. They get huge sponsors year in and year out. So, you know, I know it looks bad, but I'm going to say that it would be very unbeneficial to the NFL and the Washington team itself if they decided to change the name.
Now, guys, after the interview with Dr. White, I had a chance to talk to him for a considerable amount of time afterwards. And the one thing we talked to is where the Redskins name actually came from. And from his understanding, it came from the use of collecting scalps as a bounty, having a bounty on scalps. In this time, and considering where this country has come in the past 55 years since the Civil Rights Movement back in the 1960s, wouldn't it make sense, and Scott, this is kind of more to you, wouldn't it make sense to continue to make this a one nation thing? If it's not acceptable for any other race, why is it still acceptable in this case?
I'm going to say that because they're the sad thing is that they are overlooking the race itself. The big reason is they're not looking into the the whole problem with being against an entire nation of a different race of people. They're looking into polls of, okay, what happens if we change it if we think we're going to lose fans or if we're going to gain fans? That's what's going on with this. That's like the professor's interview. What he was saying was very powerful and moving, but the problem with what he was saying is that he's talking on a very personal level. and he's talking on a very personal level to 300+ million people. So it's about the money more so than it is the people itself.
Absolutely. And Sonny, to then turn this to you, this is an economy-driven decision at very many levels. Yes, it's the personality in it, and there's the humanity side of it, but this is also a very big economic decision. A rebranding of an entire NFL franchise is a huge decision. How is that? I mean, I understand your position as against it, but how do you take that and how do you rebrand an entire name that's existed for 40 years?
Well, Dan, the New Orleans Pelicans did it, changing their name, so I have complete faith that it can be done in the NFL as well. And you talked about the economics of this, and quite frankly, it really does come down to greed right now. The team owner, Daniel Snyder, he fights citing the 81-year history of the Washington Redskins, which I know is an argument of yours, stating that in that 81-year history, they've won Super Bowls, they've got all this greatness that they want to continue going with the name, and they do not want to give it up. But I have to say, you know what? The team owner's full of it. At the end of the day, this comes down to greed. This comes down to money. And like he said, it's a big business. They're looking to make a buck.
And Matt, have you seen, I don't know if you've seen the different potential name changes that have been thrown around. There's names, the Washington Generals, the Washington Warriors, as well as the Washington Griffins, other names. How does one go about this process, and how long do you think it's going to take to make this change if it is to happen?
You know, I think this change, it's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And I think Dan Snyder needs to realize that he just needs to make the change. If he keeps on going, America is just going to get more infuriated. This is a franchise that overall, Dan Snyder is following in the older Redskins owner, George Marshall, who made the name change to the Redskins when they were in Boston. And you know, this team, they played the Dixie song as fight songs. They were one of the last teams to allow African Americans on their team in 1963 when the federal government forced them to do it. So I just think this whole franchise is built around this whole, as Sonny put it, racism.
Dan, I just want to pitch in there.
Go ahead.
This team they're worried about losing the history, losing the name that they built for themselves. But in essence, this team is not the Washington Redskins. This team is the team of players. It's RG3, it's Alfred Morris, it's the fandom of the great city of Washington. So just in changing the name, you're not going to suddenly lose the history of the sport, or of the team rather. I'm a broadcaster. I've done plenty of things. I've got experience. I've done internships. If I all of a sudden change my name, does that get taken away from me all of a sudden? Absolutely not.
You make a valid point, Sonny, but I think what Scott is alluding to here is that when you change that, it also changes your identity. I think it doesn't necessarily take away from the history. The franchise is what it is. But I think Scott can say here is that there's a big change. I think the Pelicans in the NBA, to make that reference, a completely different scenario surrounding that, but that name change is a drastic change for that franchise.
Yeah, and no offense to the NBA, but the NFL is still much larger. It has a much larger fan base, and I know you're saying you're talking about RG3 and you're talking about Alfred Morris in the current team, but you're taking away the identities of the players who were a part of the past. You're taking away. They were proud to say, I won a Super Bowl when I was on Washington. And now if you change the name, eventually down the history, they're going to look at, oh, these players were just part of a conflicting team and they're not going to get as much recognition, even though they earned it just as much as every other player.
Well, Scott, I hear what you're saying, but I just would like to quickly rebut that. You look at the history of the LA Dodgers. They used to be in Brooklyn, and obviously they did really well. They won a bunch of World Series. They really did build a name for themselves, and that was their identity. And that identity got taken away from them from changing their location to the opposite side of this country.
Absolutely.
And yet they still uphold that.
You make that point. Matt, I just want you to say, the two of them had a second. Do you have any just last thoughts?
Just like,
we have
like
about
you said,
30
you were
seconds
saying the players are playing for Washington. For that city, not actual Redskins. I think that when you win a Super Bowl, you win it for your city, for your fans. Not of course you want to say, I won a Super Bowl with Washington Redskins in 1991, but I think it's the overall city aspect. And as long as they stay in Washington, I don't think really you take away that history of that team.
Absolutely. All right, thank you guys for joining me. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back here on Laker Connections, Oswego Alumni and Media Summit moderator Lou Borrelli will Skype into the show to give us his thoughts on this year's summit. This is Laker Connections, the Media Summit pregame show. Stay with us.
Thanks. You believe this guy?
Are you trying to start a wildfire?
Sorry. Pass the honey?
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Hi, I'm Al Roker, class of 76, Oswego State University. You're watching WTOP, Channel 10. We didn't have this when I was in school. We just had radio and smoke signals.
We are Cub Scouts from Oswego, Pack 888, and you are watching WTOP.
The 2013 Louis B. O'Donnell Media Summit. Moderated by ESPN sports broadcaster and class of 87 Steve Levy. Coming to Waterman Theater November 6th. Stay connected by visiting mediasummit.org for updates.
Attention students and faculty. Avery Rental Properties is now renting for the next school year. Avery accommodates all group sizes, small or large. Avery Rental Properties. Make our house your home. 24-hour maintenance, garbage removal, snow removal, and off-street parking. Avery Rental Properties. 315-343-5005.
Hi, I'm CNN's Rob Marciano, and you're watching WTOP 10, your television station.
Welcome back here to Laker Connections, the Media Summit pregame show. I'm Dan I. Once again, thanks to our panelists, Scott, Sonny, and Matt for joining me. Well, the Louis B. O'Donnell Media Summit has become a staple event here at SUNY Oswego, and this year we'll see it take on a sports theme. Moderated this year by Lou Borrelli, the Media Summit will surely be a tremendous event, and we here at WTOP will have your coverage of that with the Red Carpet Show as well as a live stream of the summit. A pioneer of cable television, Borrelli created the Media Summit back in 2005, and along with the help of alumni Al Roker, changed the name in honor of Louis B. O'Donnell back in 2007. A frequent face at Laker hockey games as well as any Oswego events, Borrelli captures any opportunity that he has to give back to the campus, and this year will moderate the discussion. And tonight we are fortunate enough to have Lou with us via Skype. I'm not sure if we have him yet. Lou, thanks for joining us if you're there. My question for you is, what makes this year different going with the sports theme and yourself jumping back in to moderate this year?
Hey guys, sorry I can't hear you, but I'm getting some questions sent to me. Going with the sports theme this year, basically we haven't done the sports theme since the second summit. And the year that we did, the Lakers won the Frozen Four, so I thought it was about time we brought our good luck charm back so that they could win again this year. So it's good a reason as any for me.
This year specifically, I know things have changed now. Steve Levy will be on the panel instead of as the moderator. What's exciting you about this year? What are you looking forward to the most? And I know in years past you've been there, you've been on these panels, you've been around, and what's your take?
Well, having Steve Levy on the show will be great. I think that Steve's a great role model for student broadcasters at Oswego. He's at the top of his game as being one of the longest running hosts of SportsCenter, and again, because he's sat in the seats of the Oswego students that have been in the audience, I think he'll have a lot to talk about. I'm anxious to hear what he and John Kutchko have to say about SportsCenter's impact on local sports and local markets, because, as you know, the whole SportsCenter phenomenon has essentially altered the way local broadcast stations cover sports because there's such an overload of sports information from ESPN's multiple channels 24/7. So that's the story.
All right. Thank you very much, Lou, for joining us. Obviously, some technical difficulties. We're looking forward to seeing you in just a couple of weeks. Once again, November 6th, the Media Summit.
Thank you, guys. Good to talk to you.
All right. Thanks. Have a good night. Get off to bed. All right. Well, for the next couple of weeks here at Laker Connections, once again, we'll be devoted to your coverage of the Oswego Media Summit in 2013. Obviously, for the next 2 weeks, Oswego and Laker Connections here will feature the special theme, Laker Connections, featuring input, once again, from more students and faculty alike about the biggest issues in sports today. We've seen the paying of NCAA athletes as well as now this issue. And we'll hope you join us continuously here as we count down to the Louis B. O'Donnell Media Summit. That will do it for us here at Laker Connections on WTOP. Thank you once again to Lou Borrelli for joining us, Sonny Goldbaum, Scott Wiktorowski, and Matt Moran for joining me on the panel. And a special thanks to Dr. Kevin White. Tune in tomorrow morning to Top in the Morning. Thank you and have a good night.
The 2013 Louis B. O'Donnell Media Summit. Moderated by ESPN sports broadcaster and class of '87 Steve Levy. Coming to Waterman Theater.